My father, a pastor, my brother, a pastor, and I, a prodigal son. My name is William Fuentes, and this is my story. I grew up in a Christian home where my parents served the Lord. Like I said, my dad was a pastor, and my mom helped lead worship. She played the piano. And every time the doors were open, I was there. Had 5 sisters, 1 brother, and we all sang. And so every opportunity that my dad had, we would get on stage and he would have us sing. He had a TV station show on Sunday morning that he would preach on, and he would have us go on there and sing. And so at home we were grounded in the Bible, grounded in the Lord. And so we were taught at a young age. At the age of 8, at Kingsville, Texas, my dad was preaching about salvation through Jesus Christ on Easter. And I went forward and I asked Christ to come into my life and to save me. My dad took us home and he sat me down and started going with me step by step of what it means to be saved and what Jesus did for us. And a couple of weeks later, I was baptized. So we were constantly serving, going to Mexico with my dad, visiting with my dad, and not just I, but my brother also. So we learned at a young age to serve the Lord. As I became a teenager, I started to learn to play the guitar. And one of the reasons I wanted to play the guitar was my uncle played the guitar. He was an evangelist, Sammy Fuentes, and he would sing. He sang in a quartet, and I wanted to be like him. And only the Lord knew that as years would go past that I would use my talents to serve the Lord playing the guitar also. But in my teenage years, when Dad was called to different churches, I started leading worship for him, playing the guitar while Mom played the piano, and I would lead the congregation into worship. It was a great time in my life, a great time of serving the Lord, and was very, very happy. Started working in a place called TG&Y, and I was an assistant manager there. And I got to meet a young lady named Jamie, and we started dating, and we dated for over a year, and we were pretty serious. And next you know, as she decided she was going to go to California to live with her sister for a year or two. And so she broke up with me, and that devastated me. I was upset. And at the same time, my dad ended up retiring after over 30 years of ministry. And so I never got connected. I was still hurt. Never got connected in a church, never looked for another church, just started to live the life that I wanted to live. And even then, I would read the Bible, I would pray, but as not going to church and not being connected with other believers, I started to fall away. And falling away was just dating other girls, and actually just being a womanizer. And I would drink, but never got drunk, but I knew that was something that I did not want to do, but sin just started getting a hold of me. As a couple of years go by, Jamie ends up moving back to Oklahoma City, and we got back together and we started dating. I proposed to her, and she accepted, and we got married. And for those years, the first beginning years, we never got into church. We flew to Chicago and enjoyed our married time, and I started working at FedEx, making good money. And yet, through all that, I started being very unhappy. My wife ended up having 2 miscarriages, and it devastated her, and of course it hurt me too, and it was something that we had struggled with. And even when we're out of church, we were praying and asking God to bless us with a child. And so during that time, as I'm working at FedEx, I started getting just so unhappy. Just did not like going to work. I'd come home and I would argue with my wife, and it didn't matter what it was. It could have been what she cooked. It didn't matter. But we started not getting along. We were fighting, and I was just struggling. I was struggling and so unhappy. I started getting letters from my twin sister, Wendy, and she started writing a letter. And at that time, God did give us a baby. The doctor said that we would not have this one too, and yet God blessed us with Brianna. And that's when those letters came. And when the letters came, my sister started telling me how I should raise my daughter and how we should be in church raising her to know the Lord. And deep down inside, I knew that was true, but my pride got in the way, and I was angry. I was upset because I started saying, who are you to tell me how to live my life? But deep down, I knew she was right. Then my brother-in-law, her husband, started, coming by and inviting me to go play golf, and we'd go play golf, and he'd invite this preacher from church, and we'd go play golf, and it seemed like every weekend we were playing, and the preacher was there, and yet they never did force anything on me. They just showed me that they cared for me. And they kept asking me to come to church, and I would say yes, but I would never come. And deep down inside, I knew that I needed to go back to church. I needed God back in my life, but pride stood in my way. And just like the prodigal son who left and squandered everything, that was me. That was my life. I was living my life the way I wanted to live. So one day as I go back to work, there was a gentleman named Bill Kern, and he approached me and said, William, can I ride with you today? Will you hire me to ride with you today? I am going to sell my route. And I said, sure. So we got in the van and we took off. And as we're talking, I asked him, I said, Bill, why are you quitting? Why are you selling your route? I mean, what are you going to do? And he came out and said, I'm going to go into the ministry. God has called me to preach. At that time, Bill started planting seeds in my heart. And the Lord was using him to convict me and talk to me. And as he's talking to me, I start remembering the times that I was so happy serving God and being in church and in fellowship with other believers. And I started getting excited. It's like I didn't want him to leave. And the day was already winding down. And it's like, man, if he could just stay here and keep talking to me. And so I asked him, I said, Bill, will you go tomorrow with me on my route? And he said, sure. And so I went home and I just kind of pondered the things that he was saying and the letters that my sister was sending me and my brother-in-law and talking to me. And I couldn't wait for the next day to get with Bill and just keep talking. I get to work and I'm loading the van and I get this call from Bill and said, William, I can't make it today as we're having to pack and get ready to move. And I said, Bill, that's fine. That's okay. And I thanked him for going with me the day before. And I got in the van. I started driving. And that was God's time for me to be alone with him. God started dealing with me and talking to me as I'm recalling the times of how good God was and how God took care of me. And as I'm driving through all day, I just kept thinking, God, I can't do this no more. I'm tired. I'm tired of living a life that's not right, a life that's a lie. I'm tired of not being the father, the husband that I should be. I was just tired, and I was so unhappy. I pull up in the terminal and stop my truck at the end of the day, and I started praying. And I prayed to God, and I said, God, I've ruined this life that you've given me. I've ruined my family. I ruined my job. I ruined it all. God, I need you to take over. I need you to take it all. And I said, God, today, I give you my job. I give you my wife, my child, my family. I give you me, because I'm tired. I got in my car and I started driving home, and it's like God was just doing a work on me. Got home and I sat my wife down and I told her what was going on, and I told her, look, we need to get back into church. We need to start serving God. And we were both crying, and we started praying. We decided, this Sunday is Father's Day. We're going to go to church. You remember that my sister kept inviting us to go to her church. Well, she called and invited us to go to church, and I said, yeah, we'll go to church. And so that following Sunday, we decided to go to church. And as we are driving to church, I told my wife, I said, look, I want to go to First Baptist more, not to her church. Just like my pride started getting in the way. I didn't want her to see that she was right. Here's my ego, my pride getting in the way. But as I'm driving on the highway, I'm just bawling, crying, trying to regain my composure as I'm driving. And I remember I was supposed to exit, and I missed the exit. And as I keep driving, I said, we missed the exit. We need to get off here. And so I get off the exit. And as I get off the exit to turn around, there's my sister's church. So we just decided, hey, we're here. Let's just go ahead. We pull into the parking lot, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just trying to wipe all the tears away from my face. I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm actually here, going to church with my family. And as we get out of the car and I'm carrying the baby and we're walking in, my sister's waiting at the door, just looking out the glass door to see, will this Sunday be the Sunday that her brother would come to church? We opened the door. She gave us a big hug. My brother-in-law gave us a big hug, and we went to sit down, and the choir started singing, and I thought, wow, that was beautiful. It's like I was listening to something that I had missed for years. The preacher started preaching, and truly I don't really remember what he was preaching on, but all I just kept saying, when he gets done, I need to go to the altar. I need to go to the altar and give it to God at the altar. So as soon as he got done, grabbed my wife and my baby, and we went to the front, fell at the altar and just cried and was broken before the Lord, and told the Lord, today is a new day. Got up, and the pastor was still there, and he asked me to come forward as I had just sitting down. And I got up and I shared exactly what was going on in my life. And just like I asked Christ to forgive me, I asked the church to forgive me for the way I was living, because I knew the truth and wasn't living it. And the church forgave me and took me in. After that, we started getting involved in church, started singing at the homeless place. My wife and I started serving at retirement homes. Whatever the Lord wanted us to do, we did it. One of the hardest things that I had was, as the prodigal son, as the father's waiting on the porch for his son to come home, he comes home and the father doesn't even mention anything about the wrongdoings that he did. He loved him. He accepted him. And yet the prodigal son said, if I could just go to work for my father, he would hire me. And yet the father took him in as his son. And that was the hardest thing I was trying to get through was, God, I knew the truth and I wasn't living for you. Don't you need to punish me? don't you need to do something for the way I was living? And I just kept hearing in my spirit, he just kept saying, I love you. I love you. I love you. And that was the hardest thing to do, hardest thing to accept. That God would love me after everything that I had done. Finally, after weeks of just praying and talking to him, I finally said, Lord, thank you for loving me. Thank you for loving me. There might be someone out there who's a believer and is struggling right now. Somebody who's struggling in sin. Somebody who's struggling and saying, man, can God really forgive me and bring me back? I'm here to tell you, yes, he can. He will love you. He will hold you. And he'll give you another chance. Will you come to him? He's waiting with open arms for you. Maybe you're out there and you don't know the Lord. You know, Jesus loved you. The Bible says God demonstrated his own love towards us while we were in sin. Christ died for us. Christ took our punishment on the cross that we deserved. He died, they buried him, and he rose on the third day to conquer sin and death. Will you accept Christ today as your Lord and Savior? Just confess your sin to him. Come to him. Open your heart to him and tell him how you're feeling. And he will love you. My prayer today, that you would come to a loving Father as I did.